Hi everyone, it's Tammy Sharrow. Welcome to the online version of Health 2250. This is class 11, so the resources, you obviously found this PowerPoint. So all the resources for this class are under that pre-class learning tab on Blackboard. Today I'm going to do an introduction of synthesis as part of the evidence-informed decision-making process, talk about synthesis of the literature, and prepare you to do your online assignment for 5% of your grade. So what is synthesis? Well, as I mentioned, it is a step in the evidence-informed decision-making wheel. It follows define and search and the appraisal piece. Now we've completed those two steps, we're ready to synthesize that literature. So the goal with synthesis is to interpret research information and literature to form recommendations for practice based on the findings from that literature. And this step is a really important piece because it helps you answer the question, what does the research evidence tell me about this issue? And it also prepares you for the next step, the adapt step, where you would look at those recommendations and figure out how you're going to adapt them for your specific clinical setting. So what does it mean to synthesize? Well, the little puzzle pieces there are a good visual of what synthesis is. It's the putting together of parts or elements so as to form a whole. So we combine elements of several sources of literature to help you often answer a research question, to be able to make a point, and to be able to make recommendations for practice. So imagine you have encountered a situation in your practice that is causing you to be curious. Maybe you have a clinical curiosity, you want to learn more. You might have a concern for your clients, or you might even be disturbed by a particular nursing practice that you are observing around you. You could even have a persistent clinical problem that needs a solution. And so this is where synthesis comes in. Synthesis is about concisely summarizing and linking different sources in order to A, review the literature on a topic, make recommendations for practice, but then to connect those recommendations to your particular practice. So what synthesis is not, it's not a critique or an appraisal that you would have already completed. So the literature you're looking at in your synthesis is deemed credible and having integrity. It's of high quality, and so it's not a critique or appraisal. It's not analysis. We're not simply summarizing what different individuals think or say. It's not a review of the literature, and it's not a lot of direct coding without using your own voice or interpretation. The one thing we find during the process of synthesis is often we discover knowledge overlaps or agreement between sources, or we may find knowledge gaps or disagreements. So questions to ask yourself is which sources overlap or share the same opinion or findings? Have you found any common themes or outcomes in the research literature that you're exploring? What meaning or conclusions could you draw from the outcomes, the themes, the data on this particular topic? and how might that new meaning change or reinforce your practice? So using the statistics, the facts, the knowledge in the research, what kind of a story are you going to craft for the reader of your synthesis? What is your angle or your personal interpretation of the evidence? And this is where having your own voice becomes really important. And then to ask yourself, how have you shown the reader which parts of the argument or which pieces of research are most useful or important? So, the synthesis assignment. So, you've been asked to synthesize the literature on a given topic. How to become a synthesis superhero. Who can be one? Someone who thinks critically. So we really need to be able to look at the literature, look at the findings, the outcomes, the themes, and think really critically about what those are telling us. So once again, it's someone who is able to extract or identify those ideas or themes from research findings. And this is often I find it's a big challenge for students because you might read an article and see the findings, but how do you attach those particular findings to an overall common theme? Superheroes are someone who can analyze multiple sources. Today, you're only going to look at 3 sources. Next year in third year, you'll be analyzing 10 sources. And if you were working on a continuous improvement committee, say in your clinical practice setting, you could be looking at hundreds of articles. So today we're going to explore 3. A superhero is also someone who is able to combine those multiple sources and come up with those particular themes or concepts. Someone who integrates the main ideas from the sources. Someone who uses the information and those sources to make your own point or your own voice. And someone who is able to answer the question, what do we know or not know about this particular issue? So let's look at the synthesis assignment objectives. You're going to demonstrate your understanding of this particular step by enacting the following information and research literacy objectives. So you're going to document the process of using information in a transparent and systematic way. You'll synthesize new and complex information from 3 different sources, and you're going to relate those findings to a specific clinical query or question that I've provided to you, and then you'll form recommendations for practice. So one of the effective ways to do this is to develop a synthesis matrix. The points on the matrix, the themes, the outcomes, should be taken from the findings, discussion, and recommendation sections of the article. We're not looking at the literature review and the articles they explored to build a case as to the significance or worthiness of the topic. We're looking at results and findings. So you may identify themes while reading through the article and taking notes on the article on the particular matrix worksheet, which I'm going to show to you in a few minutes. For this exercise, I want you to prioritize the most important 3 to 4 themes or outcomes on the version that you hand in. All 3 articles may not cover each theme, but you are looking for themes or ideas that are found in at least 2 of them. So the steps to kind of identify these main outcomes or themes. You'll review the articles and you'll complete the synthesis matrix for the individual articles. You're going to identify the key concepts, as I mentioned, based on outcomes or findings, and you're going to put those in the left column of the matrix. Under each heading, you're going to summarize the findings for each outcome in that article. Asking yourself, were the results significant? Were they non-significant? Was there any other interesting findings that they discovered that maybe they didn't initially set out to? Are their findings unclear? And you're going to repeat this process for each of the other articles, adding more concepts to the left column if they aren't already there. Let's have a look at this. So as you can see, across the top are the 3 particular articles you're going to synthesize. And down the left are the main 3 or 4 outcomes that you're going to explore. So maybe in Article 1, you identify 3 particular outcomes. Maybe you come to Article 2 and only 2 of those outcomes are referred to in Article 2. And then you come to Article 3 and it covers all the first 3 outcomes and an interesting new additional 4th outcome. And you put this table together then to be able to see where there is consensus or disagreement in the literature on your particular research. So here I have a little example. This was a research question around, does skin-to-skin contact while in the labor room increase breastfeeding rates? And this particular synthesis included 3 articles. Across the top, you can see Smith, Jones, Wallaby, and Truston, and 3 main ideas or outcomes or themes came out of these articles. The first main idea was on skin-to-skin and effect on attachment. You can see that 3 of the articles spoke to that particular concept. The main idea B, skin-to-skin and effect on human milk supply. Once again, looking across, following left to right, you can see that 3 of the articles spoke to this. And lastly, main idea C, skin-to-skin and its effect on feeding. And interestingly enough, only 2 of the 4 articles spoke to that. Now, this is a very, very brief depiction of the findings related to those particular concepts. So this is like bare bones. I would certainly expect more than this in your synthesis. You'll also note that they did include the page number for where they're extracting their data. So objective number 1 of the assignment, you're going to demonstrate you can document the process of using information in that transparent and systematic way by completing the matrix. Number 2, objective 2, you're going to synthesize the evidence across articles. So comparing and contrasting the ideas or evidence in the articles by answering questions in the following pages of the assignment. Where do all the authors agree that looked at a specific concept? Where do the authors disagree? Are there any specific unique contributions, something only one of the authors examined, and what were their findings? And then lastly, you're going to relate the findings to your specific clinical query or your research question. So here you translate the results of the synthesis into practice recommendations that really flow logically from that synthesis. So you're going to be looking at those 3 specific articles. You're going to be reflecting on the different findings they had in relation to stress, anxiety, depression. Mindfulness was another concept. You're going to see which one of those articles maybe had the most effect, the biggest impact, the article that had statistically significant findings. And then you're going to provide a short summary paragraph to answer that research question. So start with a thesis statement, a main message, and then follow that by several sentences that support your thesis statement, and include your conclusion. Would you be comfortable using evidence, and in which area of your practice? Would you consider implementing one of these programs or strategies or approaches to managing stress in nursing students in your particular school of nursing? Here, I provided an example of that paragraph of a written synthesis based on those 4 articles that were explored in relation to that clinical query around skin to skin in the labor room and the impact on breastfeeding rates. So this gives you a little idea of kind of the depth, I guess, of information that I'm expecting in that last paragraph. So under pre-class learning, class number 11, there's a detailed description of the synthesis assignment. There's a template for the matrix you can use. Following that, the questions are laid out that you need to think about, and then space for that summary paragraph. Once again, everybody's completing this individually, and they're going to submit it into the Dropbox that's at the bottom of that Class 11 tab on Blackboard. There's a couple other resources there. There's one specific little 2-page article that talks about synthesis and gives some good examples of what is not a synthesis, like examples of simply stating what the authors say, or simply summarizing what different authors say, as opposed to comparing and contrasting the findings from different studies, and then using that information to think about what is the most effective strategy, and which one would you consider implementing in your practice to be able to solve the particular clinical query presented. So I hope this has been helpful. As I mentioned, I will be available by email during the time of the class, 10 till 1. And then I've given you till 4:30 to submit the synthesis, so a little bit of extra time. We're all under a lot of stress right now, and I want you to be able to have some extra time